Hello everyone, welcome to tonight's Nancy Drew Mystery Hour. For the past 2 nights I have been reading The Hidden Staircase, book 2 in the Nancy Drew Mystery series, and one of my favorite. So far, Nancy has been threatened by Nathan Gambit, and her father's been threatened as well. Nathan is a disgruntled landowner who claims that the railroad did not pay him adequately for the land they purchased. And then they met Rosemary and Floretta Turnbull, 2 sisters who live in an old mansion that they think is haunted. When we left off last night, Nancy was about to inspect a closet to see whether or not that's where the ghosts live. Let's find out what happens. Chapter 7. What can it mean? Empty, Nancy Drew announced as she flung open the closet door and looked carefully inside. There's no one here now, at least. Floretta, who had been clinging to her sister, relaxed her hold, but continued to gaze uneasily about the bedroom as though expecting to find the thief in plain sight. I'm afraid it's a case for the police, Nancy said thoughtfully. Oh, we don't want to call them, Rosemary protested quickly. They will only laugh. We talked to them once about strange things that have been going on here, and they weren't interested. They seem to think that someone is trying to play a joke on us, and they didn't even send a man to investigate, Floretta added. If only you will take the case, Miss Drew, Rosemary begged. We'll be glad to pay you well for your work. But I'm not a detective, Nancy protested. We heard about the clever way you helped the Horner girls in Abigail Rowan. Surely you can help us. We need help so desperately. I'll be glad to do anything I can, Nancy promised willingly, but of course I'll not take money. But it wouldn't be fair of us to ask you. I am really tremendously interested in the mystery. I'll have a lot of fun trying to solve it. Whether I can do it or not is another matter. There are really no clues for which to start. If I could spend a night or so here, you're more than welcome to come and visit us if you will, Rosemary told her. But you come at your own risk, Floretta added. I'll talk with my father this evening and ask him if I may come, Nancy promised. How will you notify us? Floretta asked. We have no telephone. Oh, I'll send a note. I think it wise not to advertise the real purpose of my visit. A good idea, Rosemary agreed. Floretta and I will take care not to mention it to anyone. Nancy glanced at her watch. I must dash home now, or Father will be worried to death. Hastily saying goodbye, she left the house and sprang into her roadster. In a few minutes she had reached the main road and was driving swiftly toward River Heights. I've certainly struck a real mystery, she mused thoughtfully as she drove along the smooth road. The mansion is haunted, all right, but it's haunted by a flesh and blood ghost, unless I miss my guess. Nancy Drew had no theory which would explain the strange happenings at the mansion, but if her father granted permission, she planned to stay several days at the house and investigate everything thoroughly. What the search would reveal, she had no idea, but she felt certain she would unearth valuable clues. I'll go home and try to piece things together, she told herself. That's what a regular detective would do. It was after dark when Nancy finally reached home. She flashed into the garage with a skill born of long practice and hurried guiltily in toward the house. As she had expected, her father had reached home ahead of her. Nancy, I've been worried about you, he began. Don't scold, Nancy begged. I tried not to break my promise, but I couldn't help it this time. Oh, I had the most exciting afternoon. But exciting adventures are hard on poor old Dad, Mr. Drew chided. When you didn't get back, I thought perhaps you had had car trouble on the road. I was about ready to start after you. I'm terribly sorry. Honestly, I am. Nancy looked so genuinely sorry that Carson Drew promptly forgave her. Tell me about your adventure, he suggested. Oh, I met 2 of the dearest ladies. They are rather eccentric, but oh so charming and nice. And you call that an adventure, said Mr. Drew. Of course not. I haven't reached the adventure part of it yet. These ladies live in a haunted house. Of course, it isn't really haunted, but strange things are going on there, and they want me to find out what's what. Breathlessly, Nancy poured out her words. Not so fast, Carson Drew stopped her. I can't make heads or tails of what you're saying. You met 2 ladies who live in a haunted house, which really isn't haunted. That doesn't make sense. Oh, you lawyers are so particular about facts, Nancy sighed. Beginning at the first part of the story, she related everything which had happened at the Turnbull mansion. Her father listened quietly until she had finished. I've heard a great deal about the Turnbull sisters, he remarked. They come from an excellent family. I believe the mansion has belonged to the Turnbulls ever since it was built. It would be a tragedy to Miss Rosemary and Miss Floretta if they had to sell the place now, Dad. I want so badly to help them. They have invited me to visit them, and I'd like to do it. May I? I don't know what to say, Nancy. From what you've told me, I am inclined to believe that there may be danger in visiting that house. I'll be careful, Dad. It won't be any worse for me to sleep in that house than it is for Rosemary and Floretta Turnbull. But you're my daughter. If you had been assigned to the case, you wouldn't hesitate to stay there at night, would you? No, Carson Drew admitted reluctantly, for he saw that Nancy was neatly cornering him. And you've often said you wanted me to grow up self-reliant and brave. Carson Drew threw up his hands in resignation. You win, Nancy. Your eloquence could convince a jury. When may I go? Well, let me see. This is Monday. Mr. Drew considered the desk calendar. I'll be leaving for Chicago myself Thursday. You're going to Chicago? I didn't know that. Yes, on a business trip. The matter just came up this afternoon. I'll be gone about a week. He looked speculatively at Nancy. Wouldn't you like to come along? Oh, of course, but if I do, I wouldn't get to visit the Turnbull sisters. Are you willing to give up the trip for the chance to ferret out this mystery? Oh, yes. Carson Drew sighed. I guess you're a born detective, Nancy. Well, since your heart is set on it, I'll give my consent. You may visit the Turnbulls while I am gone. A whole week? Yes, if you like. Goody, goody! Nancy pranced wildly about the room. Carson Drew laughed. I hope you catch the ghost if it will make you happy. Then the smile faded from his lips. You'll not run into danger? Not if I see it first. Seriously, Nancy, you'll be careful, won't you? Of course. Carson Drew crossed the room and paused in front of his desk. Unlocking a drawer, he took out a shiny object and handed it to his daughter. Your revolver, Dad? Yes, I want you to take it with you. But I shan't need it. I hope not, but it pays to be prepared. I'll feel better if I know you have it. The mansion ghost may turn out to be a livelier one than we expect. Carson Drew spoke half-jestingly, little suspecting that his observation was a true prophecy. Chapter 8. The Warning. The next 2 days following her visit to Cliffwood, Nancy Drew went about the house in a preoccupied state. Alternately quiet and talkative, she was never without an air of suppressed excitement. In an attempt to strike a plausible explanation for the strange happenings at the mansion, she reviewed every detail of the story related by the Turnbull sisters. It's possible the shadows on the wall at night could have been caused by the wind blowing the trees, she told herself. Still, Rosemary is a practical woman, and I'm sure she wouldn't be frightened by a thing like that. Before she had visited the mansion with Rosemary, Nancy had been inclined to suspect that someone was playing a practical joke on the Turnbull sisters, but the loss of the diamond bar pin made such a theory seem unlikely. Without a doubt, someone had stolen the pin, but in what manner she was unable to guess. Apparently, it had vanished into thin air. The longer Nancy reflected on the mystery, the more certain she was that a sinister hand was behind everything. However, she refrained from disclosing this thought to her father, lest he reconsider his promise and refuse her permission to visit the old house during the week he was to spend in Chicago. Carson Drew planned to leave on Thursday. Nancy had written a note to the Turnbull sisters telling them when to expect her. She had taken care not to mention the approaching visit to anyone save her father, and even Hannah Gruen was in ignorance concerning her plans. On the day set for Mr. Drew's departure, Nancy helped him pack his bag, and then shortly before the train time took him to the railroad station in her roadster. When shall I expect you home? Nancy inquired as they stood on the platform waiting for the train. A week from today. If you would like me to, I'll stop at Cliffwood on my return trip. Your story has aroused my interest, Nancy. I'm curious to have a look at that old stone mansion. Oh, I wish you would stop for me, Nancy declared enthusiastically. She glanced carefully about to see that no one was within hearing distance. If I haven't solved the mystery by that time, you'll help me, won't you? Of course I'll do anything I can, but from what you've told me, it sounds like a tough case. I'm not sure that I'll be able to solve it myself. However, if you fail, I'll try it. The conversation was cut short as a shrill whistle announced the approach of the train. I'll telegraph you the exact hour of my arrival in Cliffwood, he said hastily. The Turnbulls live some distance from the railroad station, so I'll meet you in the car, Nancy promised. And remember, don't run into danger. The heavy passenger train came pounding and clanging into the station, and Mr. Drew picked up his bag. Kissing Nancy goodbye, he made a dash for the Pullman cars, which were at the rear of the train, far down the track. Nancy waited until the train pulled out and then slowly made her way back to the automobile. Now that her father had actually departed, she felt lonesome. I may as well stop at Helen Corning's before I go home, she decided as she stepped into the roadster. Helen Corning had been her chum for years. Accordingly, she called at the home of her chum and was pleased to find her there. Helen promptly tempted her into a lively game of tennis, and before Nancy realized it, the afternoon was nearly gone. "You must stay for dinner," Helen urged. "It won't be any fun eating at home all alone." "But Hannah is expecting me." "We can telephone her." "Oh, all right," Nancy gave in. Not only did she stay for dinner, but she remained during the evening, for Helen would not permit her to go. "Remember the fun we had at Moon Lake last summer?" Helen asked her. "You know, I never did entirely forgive you for cheating me out of a share of your adventure. Why didn't you tell me you were going to chase robbers that day when you left camp?" "I didn't know it myself." "Well, if you ever stumble upon another mystery, I want you to take me in on it." Nancy was on the verge of telling Helen about her proposed trip to the mansion, but she could not bring herself to the point of revealing the secret. Helen's intentions were of the best, but she was a natural-born gossip, and Nancy doubted that it would be possible for her to keep the matter to herself. "It might do a great deal of harm if it were rumored why I were leaving town," she thought. "No, I'll tell Helen after I return." It was late when Nancy reached home, and the housekeeper had retired. "I'm too sleepy to pack my bag tonight," she decided as she locked the doors and windows. "I'll do it first thing in the morning." But in the morning there were other matters which claimed Nancy's attention. She had promised the housekeeper a week's vacation during her visit in Cliffwood, and before the house could be closed, there were many things to be done. The entire day had slipped away almost before she realized it. "Miss Nancy, if you don't mind, I'll go to a moving picture show with my sister," the housekeeper said to her after the dinner dishes had been cleared away. "Why, of course, Hannah," she agreed generously. "I don't mind in the least. I'll be busy with my packing." As soon as Hannah had left the house, Nancy went directly to her room and began sorting out the dresses that she had planned to take with her to the mansion. It was 10 minutes after 11 when she finished. "There, I guess that's all," she decided. "Oh no, I've forgotten the revolver Dad gave me. I must take that." She hurried downstairs and went directly to the desk where the revolver had been left. But with her hand on the drawer, Nancy hesitated. Uneasily, she glanced about the room. For a reason she could not explain, she felt that someone was watching her. "I guess my nerves are getting jumpy," she thought. "I do wish Hannah would come home." Upon impulse, she moved toward the window. As she took a step forward, she thought she heard a step on the porch. Was it only imagination, or was someone really prowling about the house? Before she could make a move to investigate, the doorbell rang sharply. Nancy started. It must be Hannah, she assured herself. Probably she forgot her key. But as she crossed the room, she distinctly heard the steps creak under the weight of some person. Hesitating but an instant, she opened the door. There was no one in sight. Wonderingly, Nancy stepped out upon the veranda and glanced up and down the street. "That's strange," she murmured uncomfortably. She went to the edge of the porch and peered in the direction of the hedge. Was it possible someone was hiding in the bushes? A careful survey disclosed no human form. As she turned to go inside, her eyes fell upon a white envelope near the door. Curiously, Nancy picked it up and held it to the light. "Why, it's addressed to me," she gasped in astonishment as she made out the bold scrawl. Hastily entering the house and closing the door behind her, Nancy Drew ripped open the envelope. As she scanned the note, the color faded from her face. "An anonymous message," she whispered. "Someone has sent me a threatening letter." Well, who do you think talked? Nancy didn't tell anyone, not Hannah, not Helen. She didn't tell anyone about her secret to go visit the Turnbull sisters. Do you think the Turnbull sisters kept their word and didn't talk about it? Only one way to find out. Tune in tomorrow night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, to find out who sent Nancy that mysterious message and who let their lips loose. See you guys.